meeting of the municipal year. And before we start these proceedings, I need to bring to your attention some housekeeping matters. There's no expected fire alarm testing today. Therefore, if the fire alarm does sound, please follow the fire and emergency procedures that are applicable to the council house. This meeting will be broadcast live to the internet and will be capable of subsequent repeated viewing. And by entering the Waspide room, committee members are consenting to being filmed throughout the meeting and to the use of those recordings for webcasting. So please can I ask that you speak clearly and directly into your microphone when addressing the meeting so that online participants and the public can hear, and that it is switched off when you are not using it. Your mobile phone devices are turned to silent. Cue check. Okay, and it's not scripted here, but I just want, as it's the first meeting, I think we'll all bear with us all learning the processes and the procedures, facts and procedures as well, and how we go through today. Okay, so the first item on the agenda is, are there any apologies for non-attendance?
Through you, Chair, we've got a full complement today. Councillor Lowry, those provided apologies in reference to the finance item.
Okay, and it's especially welcome to new people here, either new councillors or new to this board, which is probably most of us, unless some people go back away. And because the last time we'd met in some format, am I correct, Councillor Murphy? 2016-ish. Did you sit on this then?
I did.
You did.
I did, Chair.
And you thought, oh, here we are again. Okay.
James,
Ah, right.
do you remember?
Very well, Councillor.
And we'll come, when we come to the terms of reference as well, we'll be reminded and be illuminated as well further about the purpose of this board. Okay, so I'd like to ask the committee to note the appointment of myself as chair and Councillor Ian Darcy as vice chair for the municipal year 24-25. Are we all in agreement?
Noted, sir.
Okay, noted. Thank you. And can I ask if there are any declarations of interest from committee members in relation to the items on the agenda set before you? No? Okay. And just if during discussion something might come up and you think, actually, I've got a declaration of interest in that, please declare it. Okay, so item number 4, terms of reference. So I'm asking the committee to note the terms of reference for the scrutiny management sent out, but we want to bring your attention to a couple of things.
Thank you, Chair, through you. So members, you'll notice in your pre-reading that we've managed to append the wrong version of Part D of the Constitution, which refers to your terms of reference. We've provided you with the copy which was agreed at the AGM in May. Those are on your desks for reference. So if there are any issues, we'll happily deal with them. But terms of reference as agreed at the AGM in May. We've reinstigated this board following recommendations from the Centre for Public Scrutiny. We took a review of those guys last year, year before. One of their recommendations that we formally constitute this body back again into our formal committee system as a 1972 governed committee. You'll note in the terms of reference, the main purpose of this board is to deal with cross-cutting issues that may affect one or more of the panels that sit underneath it. We'll also be dealing with, as a standing agenda item, both finance, performance and risk. And then you'll see in the terms of reference that most of the functions that this body will be fulfilling relate to the corporate operation of the council. So things like legal services, HR, IT, those sorts of issues will be covered here at the board. The purpose of the board is to challenge each other around your work programmes, any select committees that you might look to set up as a result of your panel. But this board doesn't have a veto over that. But of course, we all take advice from each other. Happy to answer any questions, Chair.
We could now go on to item 5, Chair's urgent business. I haven't had anything brought to my attention or wish to report anything. We move on to item 6, the medium-term financial forecast. And this is one of the parts of the standing items that will be on this board in terms of the council's financial resource performance, risks and so on. So I'm going to hand over now to David Northey, to deliver the medium-term financial forecast.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, committee. On behalf of Councillor Lowry, he sends his apologies. So he sent me in to do his work for him. So go easy on me. Okay, that's the plea. It's warm in here and it's our first meeting. Seriously, in front of you, in your papers, you've got the medium-term financial forecast. And I emphasise forecast because that's quite an important word in terms of what we try to do with finance. If we roll the clock all the way forward, of course, we've got a statutory duty to get to February and have a balanced budget and to set the council tax for the next financial year. But the journey to get to that will take us through a medium-term financial plan, and the plan is different from forecast, as the plan, when it comes to you to look at, will actually set out the plans that we have in order to close any gaps and savings, etc., to balance the budget. So this is the first step. It's a medium-term financial forecast. So, okay, great. What does it do? Well, this sets out and just gets the conversation started about the view for the next 4 years. So hopefully you've had a chance to read the papers. I've tried to set it out such that it tells you the story as you go through. So it will give you the resources that the assumptions say we will have at our disposal for the next 4 years. And just for emphasis then, the key resources for us are the revenue support grant, the council tax, and then the business rates. So there are some assumptions set out in section 5 about what the council tax might be doing for the next couple of years. 2 points of note on that one. First of all, obviously, since writing and publishing this report, we've had a change of national government. So there might be, I say might be, a change of policy in terms of future council tax. So this is based on the rules that were in place under the previous administration in terms of having a cap that we couldn't break without having to go out for a very expensive public consultation. So whether that will change or not, no indication at this stage, far too early. So that's one thing that I'll have to keep a close eye on. And then the second thing to note in terms of council tax is it's not my decision, it's a decision of full council. So when I say this is all working towards that February 25 full council meeting, it will be for the full council chamber to debate and decide what the council tax is. So these are assumptions, is the point. So we've got the resources and what that might mean to us, and then it sets out the sort of national and local context of pressures being felt in all local authorities. They are the standard ones that you would hear from any Section 151 officer about children's social care, adult social care, home to school transport for SEND children, and homelessness, which sort of came into the party as a result of the COVID years, really. So you've got the resources, you've got those additional pressures, and what this report does is say, if you put the two together, what does that mean in terms of surplus or deficit in terms of going forward? So unfortunately, it comes up with a year one deficit of about 17 million. And then that grows over the next 3 years, as you would expect, but not quite by that 17 million. Why is it such a big hit in year one? It always does that way because when we set the formal budget, we will, we will have to put in some one-offs and some grant assumptions, etc. So you always start the following year by having to back those out. So you kind of start halfway up the hill. So the approach that we're taking with the senior management team and with Cabinet is to say, that's where we start. You can now come back and as you would expect, lots of challenges to assumptions, both on the resource side and on the cost side. and we will work through those. So I will say to you that those numbers will change. Absolutely, they will change. They always do. But it's a starting point to get the conversation going. So what does that mean in terms of you as a committee? It means that I will come back at some stage with a medium-term financial plan for you to look at, and then rolling in, if I might, Chair, into the next item just for continuity. The big session that we have is the 2 days historically that we have for budget scrutiny. So there is a proposal that I would like to put to the committee through the chair, that we follow the process that we did last year, actually, where we did the budget scrutiny, I'll say early. We did it in December rather than historically straight back from Christmas in January. And so we'd like to continue that, and I'm proposing that we take the 17th and 18th of December as 2 days for budget scrutiny. And then I'll work with the chair, vice chair, and you, of course, on how that would work going forward. So I'll leave it there, Chair, and take any questions that might come up.
Thank you. I should have said earlier as well that please ask questions. Okay, it's not a one side of the table event today, and your question might think, well, I'm not sure about that. I don't think I'll ask. Somebody else might know. Please ask. It's really important, particularly if you're new to this process as well, about about the budget planning scrutiny for next year, budget scrutiny in order to inform next year, as well as the whole process of this meeting. So does anyone have any questions of the report, the financial forecast, or about the budget scrutiny planning? Councillor Holloway?
Thank you, and thank you, David, for your report. Obviously, I imagine you've been given some consideration and taking a good look at some of the recent statements from the new Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, and her intentions to only have one major fiscal event per year. Yes, we've got the budget in the autumn, but moving back that spending review and the implications for local authorities to next year, with a longer term intention to have more multi-year, longer term settlements, so local authorities can do longer term planning, etc., etc. Would you be able to give us a bit of your assessment about what that means for you in your position in these kind of reports? And your assessment would be welcome, and if it actually helps in terms of our being able to be on a strong financial footing for the future. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. So, as I said, the administration is still in their honeymoon period, aren't they? But we have had a few strong statements, I suppose, from both from the Chancellor and from the Deputy Prime Minister, who is in charge of our department. So that in itself is quite useful, I suppose. So the stated aim in manifestos from all the parties was local authorities, absolutely listen to you, you need to get multi-year settlements. So that is fine, and that's something that, quite frankly, we've all been asking for a long, long time. What I'm hearing from different groups around the country is we need to be prepared for giving them some space to do their own preparation. So it might well be that, yes, they'll keep to that commitment of multi-year, but it won't be for the first year, i.e. for us for 25-26. So it might be that there's a holding situation, in particular because, as the Chancellor was very strong, she's thinking she wants to delve into a lot of areas. So she's already made some announcements about the adult social care and the future of adult social care. The devil will be in the detail for all of us, because we get a grant that's associated with working towards those policy outcomes. So does that mean that grant gets lost or gets replaced? A bit too early to say at the moment. So the assumption still at the moment is, yes, one fiscal event, which is great, and we've got the date 30th of October for the budget. My personal view on that national grandstand budget is we don't get an awful lot of detail that helps local authorities. That tends to come. Our one-year fiscal event is what they call the financial settlement, which unfortunately over recent years has been slipping and slipping, and the last couple of years it's been sort of the 22nd of December, which is not the best time to get it when they know that everybody has to set a legal budget in February. But again, the indication at the moment is that's probably where we're going to be, certainly this December. So we will continue to have conversations and see what we can do.
Okay. Councillor Ricketts?
Thank you, Chair. To David, really, on the savings element to this 4.0, sorry, I haven't got any page numbers on here. Cumulative savings?
Oh, yeah.
Sorry, I just
Sorry, yes.
bit confused about it. Could you just talk us through this graph and that paragraph and what it actually means?
Item
4.1. It's the savings section.
online, if that's helpful.
Thank you.
Sorry, Councillor, I'm not stalling. I'm just trying to make sure I get the right page in front of me, which is right. So, I mean, this is trying to sum up in what I think is plain English, but it might not be. So 4.1 is saying, I mean, there's no hiding from the fact that government funding has been reducing. So that the graph above it is showing you that is the case. So in response to that, all councils have had to come in with efficiencies and savings. So the following graph then says to you, well, if you go back to a start point of the base budget of 2013-14, since that date, so the first year, 24-15, we reduced our budget through savings to 23 million. Cumulatively, it then became 44. Once you get up to 24-25, over that extended period, it's the best part of 190 million of savings and efficiencies, which if we take what I've just said about the medium-term forecast for a moment, it's saying there's a £17 million hole that needs to be filled in 25-26. So that would add to those cumulative savings, wouldn't it?
Just, for the layman, they might read it and think, well, we've got 188 million saved over it. But it's just the way it's written. We haven't got that. That's the savings we've had to make over a 10-year period. Just wanted to be clear on it.
Okay, I'll take that as a comment and look at how better to
Has anyone
present
else
it in
mentioned that?
medium-term
Is
financial
that
plan.
just me?
Unfortunately, Councillor, I'm trying to use SIP for guidance.
Just the way
and
the graph
standards,
goes
but,
up instead of down as well.
well, being an increasing number, but I won't debate the rights and wrongs. I will take the comment and see if I can be clearer. Thank you.
But essentially, as has been said, savings is cuts, basically, cuts in less money and less services, and the deeper it goes, is obviously we hit the bone then. And how far do you go into the bone when the healing is needed to be done more? Okay, Councillor Finn.
Oh, it's just reference to capital budget, capital funding. As a result of the government's media announcement a couple of days ago, regard to cutting a lot of capital projects out, how reliant are we on government funding for the capital projects? And I'll use an example, say the £20 million, I understood it had already come into the council, but the A386 widening, that money had already been paid by government. Is that in jeopardy or has it been received?
So, Councillor, that particular one you're talking about is that the Stonehenge route? Is that the one? Yeah. So. So, again, early days in terms of what the actual policy might be, My understanding at the moment is the major projects have already been announced, dismissed, the headlines. In terms of, you're absolutely right, we do certainly for the road network, but for a lot of projects we do have funding from government, which at this stage we have received, and I've signed recently a couple of DFT letters saying that we will continue and they will continue. So at this stage, Councillor, I'm not expecting anyone to be saying that the funding is withdrawn.
Yeah, so the A386 then from Wallwell to coming in, is that project in jeopardy now or not? Or is the funding still going to be available for that capital project?
As we stand at the moment,
We don't know.
I've got nothing to say in terms of intelligence on that, other than the conversations with the DFT at the moment are continuing as normal. So that's all I know at the moment, Councillor Finn.
Yeah, so could you just should it happen, could you just let us know as soon as possible whether that's going ahead or not, as the case may be, because we get a lot of correspondence on the matter, but obviously we can't relay to the constituents, is it happening, is it not happening? We've done the preliminary work, obviously the trees and that have been cut down, and it's all ready, so we've actually spent money on it, but it's whether we're going to be able to actually finish it or not. Thank you, David. Thank you, Chair.
Absolutely, through the normal channels, yes, everybody would be fully informed of any new grant coming in or any grant being cut. But as I say, as we sit here today, there's no conversations that I've certainly had about anything being withdrawn at this stage.
Thank you. I think all councils will be in a position of what is going to go ahead, and there'll be some certainty sought from all councils for different projects. Plus also, there is also a review of spending going on. As we know, there's a further review for further details to be revealed. So we can only take it, if no news is good news, in a sense, for committed work, and we'll see what we have going forward. Councillor Allison.
Thank you. I was just hoping you could give us a quick oversight of what the budget scrutiny looks like. So you said it was 2 days in December. Could you go through sort of a rough outline of what that process looks like? Thank you.
Through you, Chair. So over the last 10 to 15 years, it's generally been 2 to 3 days of budget scrutiny sessions, usually broken up each day into 3 or 4 specific sessions focused on a cabinet member's set of responsibilities. What we would usually provide alongside that is a draft budget report, proposed savings for the coming year from that department, alongside performance risk information, establishment, that sort of stuff. The way it would usually run is 2 days straight in this room. It's very enjoyable for all of us. And then we have a procession of cabinet members that will come in, give a 5 to 10 minute summary of what the key challenges are, what the key opportunities are that they're facing over the course of the next year. And then there's an opportunity for this group to ask questions around those plans. That takes about 2 days. The final day, we generally get together to formulate some recommendations based on what you've heard. Those recommendations are then forwarded to the Cabinet for their consideration in preparing the budget, which of course you'll all eventually have a vote on at Council in February. What we will do though, last year we focused quite clearly on those areas that are identified as part of the risk report actually later, where there is concerns over ongoing funding, demand-led pressures and so on. So last year we very much focused around children's services and our adult health and social care services. We did also include a session on what we sort of termed at the time as more universal services, so bins, potholes, that sort of stuff. That's probably what we would suggest again this year, but what we'll do, Chair, is we'll circulate the proposal that we put together last year, and if members want to make comments on what they would like to look at, then we'll happily receive them.
to close item 6 and 7, I ask you to note the medium-term financial forecast 24-25, 28-29 presented by David. The capital programme, including the capital financing requirement, will that's included there, and also revised medium-term financial strategy will be presented to the Cabinet and recommended to the City Council. Okay. Thank you, David, for all the work that goes on into this. No. Everyone happy with those items to note? Thank you very much. Okay, and on to item 8, because we combined 6 and 7.
Excuse me, Chair, I do apologise. We've noted the recommendations under agenda item 6. Agenda item 7 is budget scrutiny planning. So I'd just like to confirm, so we've made a suggestion that the budget scrutiny takes place week commencing 16th of October. That is a week in which you have a scrutiny management board scheduled anyway. Oh, sorry, December. Apologies, December. Getting ahead of myself. If the board is happy to agree that we go towards that week to hold budget scrutiny, and if you're happy for me to circulate a proposed programme, which we can agree at the next session, Chair, if that's all right.
Happy? Yeah.
Chair, is that week commencing, is it?
Week commencing.
Sorry, I haven't got my diary.
Week commencing 16th of December.
Yeah. What days?
Well, we usually do Tuesday and a Wednesday for budget scrutiny. We'll circulate programme separately, and if there's any issues that
Were there any issues last year being the Christmas period with availability?
No.
And last year, from what I recall, there were a group of people who were invited to be part of that process who wouldn't normally be part of it. This time, at least, we all have notice because we are that board that meets. So there's a few months' notice, which, and for those of us who were there, it seemed to go really well. Okay. Item 8, the annual scrutiny report, and I'll ask Ross to present this as in your pack.
Thank you, Chair. Fully aware, a number of you weren't here last year, or perhaps not involved in scrutiny. So what's in front of you is the annual report of scrutiny that was undertaken last year. It gives an overview of all of the work conducted by panels, any recommendations, and some of the work that was undertaken at select committee reviews, those small time-limited working groups. Chair, I think this we've circulated this a couple of times now, post the end of the 23-24 municipal year. Certainly happy to take any comments. But this one, we're looking for an agreement today so we can have that at council in September. Thank you, Chair.
Any questions or comment? Can I make one comment, please? Because it's to me, when I was reading it, it very much reflects the hard work that went on in the individual overview and scrutiny panels. And to me, it read a lot of things that were decided upon and done, but it does lack an opportunity to say, so what? What difference has this made to the people who live or work or visit Plymouth? So I think it'd be useful to when we set this about for next year, to give performers to actually to pull out of the scrutiny and panel decisions, what difference has it made to the people who live here? What difference has it made to the council? And thirdly, and deliberately thirdly, what difference has it made to the budget? Because what we want to look at is, okay, what's the impact on people first? And as a result, this is what it's made to the budget. Okay. So that's a recommendation, or yeah, I can make any comment on that. Councillor Murphy.
Sorry, Chair. A lot of the recommendations, especially on my committee, is actually the NHS, so it wouldn't make a difference to our budget very much anyway. So I'm not sure. And even decisions, we can put recommendations into the NHS, but whether they take them or not is their choice.
So perhaps we look at them as appropriate to whatever impact has been made within the realm of your responsibilities.
Yes, Chair. You're right, Chair. Yes, Chair, I agree very much with what Councillor Murphy said, but obviously there are many scrutiny panels and they're all affected differently. And as you alluded to, we invite other parties into budget planning, and the NHS has been involved in that previously. So I think it would be good for us as scrutineers to look back, and particularly that what if, what was the impact. So I'd be very supportive, notwithstanding what Councillor Murphy says, it doesn't directly, or she can't directly influence, but what she does in her panel is certainly taken note of. So I think we should be asking the question, what if? So I'd be supportive of that recommendation.
Thank you. So is that a vote for this?
Yeah.
Well, through you, Chair, note your comments on the what if. Both you and the Vice Chair have made that very clear, and we'll of course work with panels and chairs to make sure that we can identify those over the course of the year, and we'll very much welcome all of your input into that. Councillor Murphy's made a very good point concerning the NHS. Recommendations that we give to the NHS do need to be responded to by the NHS within 30 days. So I think what we'll do over the course of this year is be a lot tighter in terms of how we get responses, when we get the responses, and where they're reported to.
Councillor Murphy.
Thank you. To be fair, the NHS are really pretty good with their responses now. They were kind of like a little bit slack at the beginning, but I've kind of like told them off a little bit, so they are quite responsive now, and they do actually come back with the answers for us.
That's a good example of a what if. What if you contact them? That's good for you. You're chasing up there. Are we happy that for where it's appropriate, scrutiny panels will list the impact of actions and spends and decisions you've made?
Great.
Thank you.
So, Chair, we just need to agree that this report is okay to go to Council. I'm seeing nodding heads, no dissent. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, now we come to item 9. Great timing. That's the Corporate Plan Performance and Risk Report Quarter 4. And this is to be introduced by Ross J. Ross and Councillor Chris Benburley, whose cabinet role covers this aspect of work.
Well, I think I know my place, Chair, so I think Councillor Benburley will look to introduce. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to break this into 2 bits, if I may. Given that this is a new committee, I will first of all introduce the way we handle performance and what you see, and then I'll go on to talk about the report that you've had circulated, just so that everyone is aware of what's going on. When we do a performance report, we do not put into the report everything we report on for performance within the council. If we did, we would be inundating you with materials, because we have performance going down through all the teams across every part of the council. What we do is we link the performance report to the corporate plan, both in terms of key objectives and the way that that is delivered, so that we have identified across those areas, key areas of performance. That means that we're able, through cabinet and scrutiny, to link the performance plan to the corporate plan rather than to every area of council activity. So what you see are effectively headlines, but underneath all of this there is a vast amount of data. This report obviously is available for every scrutiny panel, and we identify within it which scrutiny panel is responsible for which area, to save you having to wade through all of them. And we'll be doing some more of that this year. And we also identify which cabinet members are responsible for which area, so that if a scrutiny panel wishes to call in, they know which bits they're responsible for and which cabinet members go with them, to save you thinking, is it so-and-so or so-and-so? So we've tried to make that a bit easier for you. We will shortly be doing what we do at the start of each year about this time. We'll go through with cabinet members just to check that they're happy with where the key KPIs are, in terms of, are we reporting on the right things across all the KPIs we check, so that they are the ones that give the best opportunity for a challenge and for good reporting on what we do. Adults and children's scrutiny panels have their own performance reports, and those link to areas of improvement and around children's and around risk and spend for adults, because those two scrutiny panels cover the majority of the spend and actually some of the highest risk the council faces, because those are about people, and risk to people always needs to matter. So if you're involved in children and adults, you will see additional stuff as a norm. However, if you are scrutinising something that isn't on the main dashboard, the scrutiny panel can ask for a performance report linked to that particular scrutiny, so that we can provide more in-depth performance reporting, and that will just come from the appropriate layer of performance, depending on whether you're looking at the detail of one crematoria performance, or you're looking at our entire bereavement services. You'll get different sorts of reports there, and you would ask Sally to come in because that fits under her. And if you were to ask me a question on it, I'd have to say, I'm sorry, I only know what's on the paper. You'll need to talk to Sally about that. And those people who've been on the old performance, finance and customer experience panel will know that that was quite an often an answer from whichever cabinet member held this brief, because no matter which the administration, no cabinet member can know every single part of the performance of the whole organisation. Going forward, for those of you who've seen these reports over a period of time, you will have spotted that last year we began to put some different types of materials in. We're going to continue that direction of travel, so more comparators with our SIPFA group, so that we're actually able to say not just how are we performing against what we think, but how are we performing against councils that are like us, because we think that's an important comparator. And for a lot of things, comparing us to our near neighbours doesn't give us the same socioeconomics and demographics and everything else we need to compare for like, though sometimes that is useful, and when it is, we'll put that in. We're looking at only using existing indicators, so we don't create an indicator specifically for the performance report, because that takes a whole set of time in setting up and monitoring on an ongoing basis. And we already have a really wide range of KPIs that we measure, quite often for externals, so we're being able to be compared equally when it comes to the work that local government association do, or which SIPFA do, or which some of the people who do roads or others. So we're actually comparing like with like. So rather than creating an indicator that's purely for Plymouth, we use all of those and we pull the ones that are relevant. So we're not going to create special ones, but we do look at the relevance. We are looking at where we can begin to look at outcomes as well as outputs. That's slightly harder sometimes to measure, but where we can come up with solid KPIs. We will be putting in stuff around outcome as well as output, but you can't always tell one from the other. You can't always say, because we've done this output, that we will get this specific outcome, and sometimes we don't measure the outcome. So in my area, disabled facilities grants, which we spent some time with the adults panel with last week, we can tell you what we do. We can't tell you what impact it has a year, 2 years, 5 years down the line, because we don't have the resource to be going back all the time to be monitoring on the work that we've done. So we can tell you about, on that case, outputs. We can't tell you outcomes. In other areas, outcomes are able to be seen. So we are looking at where we can bring outcomes in, because actually that's the difference we make. And that's the thing I think most of us are here to be interested in. Over the course of this year, we're going to be trying to bring a lot of our performance reporting across the whole council into much more of a cohesive system, because inevitably over decades, different parts of reporting have been done in different ways in different parts of the council. That means producing reports that are relatively standard, easy to do, making the most of new technology to pull data together isn't always easy. So we're going to be doing more of that this year, and Ross has been working on getting that set up over the last year. So there might be some changes to formats as we do that, but that will mean that the data can be more easily investigated should that be needed, either by officers, by cabinet members, or by scrutiny panels. We also want to bring in some more control tables over time. Now, control tables give you a sense of not just whether you've performed well or badly in this last reporting period, which might be a month, it might be a quarter, but also where the tolerances are and where trends are. So I know that rough sleeping will be higher this month than in lots of months, because actually in the summer that's just the trend, and we're a seaside town, and actually homeless people go on holiday, and they come on holiday to places like Plymouth. So we do have a trend, that's a normal trend. We also know we get a spike in November, which is the time we do the absolute everyone count. We know in other areas, ASB, there are peaks and troughs according to weather and times of the year. So rather than just saying, oh, why has it gone radically different from your previous report, we're going to try and bring in more control tables so you can see trends and where things report against trends. In terms of future reports, we're going to bring the Q1 report through to Cabinet in September. That gives us a chance to do the tweaks that we always do in the Q1 in terms of checking that the performance indicators are right and doing that check, but also means that we're not coming in during a summer holiday where scrutiny is not going to be meeting for a bit of time afterwards. It'll go to Cabinet and then into scrutiny in relatively quick order, because that's always a better way to do it, rather than it being seen in Cabinet, being seen by scrutiny 6 weeks later, and Cabinet getting a report from you about something you're concerned about. Actually, by the time we're already looking at the next report, so to get things moving faster and more smoothly. The Q2 report will be published in time for November Cabinet, so that it can be used as part of budget scrutiny papers. So you will have that 6 monthly report in time for your budget scrutiny. So before I go on to the detail of this report, that's sort of how we're approaching performance. It is a continual change because we're continually trying to improve the performance reporting we do. We do that with relatively few resources, so we're increasingly looking at how we can use technology to support that and mean that we can actually delve deeper and do better and give more real-time information to scrutiny panels if they need it for specific things. So this is the first part. Happy to take questions on that if you like, Chair, before I go on to the detail of the report you have in front of you.
Are there any questions? Councillor Blight.
I'm sorry, I may have missed it, but looking at the report, you've got the baseline of 2022-23, and then previous performance and latest performance. What's the timescale of previous performance and the latest performance in terms of matching it against that baseline?
Through you, Chair, so quarterly, so it'll be the last reporting period. So latest performance is Q4, previous performance Q3.
Okay, so both in this year?
Yeah.
Thank you, thank you.
Or at the end of last year, sorry. Some of those are annual though.
This is the report. The report you have is the last year. However, some items we only get every year or 2 years according to when they are reported on, because some of those are national statistics. So you do need to look at the frequency of the reporting. The more locally generated they are for service purposes, it tends to be that those are more monthly or quarterly, whereas some things are measured on an annual or other basis because of national collection of data. So you just need to check each indicator when you're looking at it.
Through you, Chair. Yeah, so absolutely agree with what Councillor Penberthy said. One of the things I think we'll be focusing on over the course of the next year is how we can get some of those comparators for those bits of data that we, at the moment, really can only pull comparators on an annual basis. So certainly thinking about things like education statistics. Education statistics are generally an annual data release. So we'll be working on what we can do locally to benchmark. But of course, what that will require is the agreement of other local authorities in a similar position to us. And not all local authorities are completely happy to supply all of that information. But we'll certainly focus on that over the course of next year.
And some of the annual ones are based purely on the fact that we only do the surveying once a year. So we only do the city survey. We do two variants, one much more outward focusing, one inward focusing. It only happens once a year. So each set of questions gets asked once every 2 years, with some every year. So some of those will be, we can't find out for 2 years, some we can't find out for a year. And I remember last year with Councillor Darcy, I spent a lot of time saying that is not an accurate figure because it relates to one issue that changed everyone's perceptions. And so I'm not prepared to be, so we had this whole thing of, it reported every time, but it was an annual figure. So there's always a bit of, it's not an exact science because of data collection.
Thank you. Any supplementary, Councillor Blight? Okay, Councillor Darcy?
Thank you. Can I just ask about the days lost to sickness? The number is up on last year, same time last year, and it's up on last quarter.
I think, with all respect, I think Councillor Penberthy just wanted a flavour of how it's reported before we delve into the details.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Can I take an opportunity to ask a question? Trends, they're typically over 3 years, you're pointing out. Will there ever be any mileage to show, is it always the last 3 years? Is that the typical format? Because sometimes it might be handy in some areas to say, well, actually, look at it now, but look what it was like 4 or 5 years ago, just to have some indication of how far we've travelled, particularly for the success bits.
Through you, Chair. So we've not actually reported 3 years previous for some time. We've not done that before. I think as we move forward with the new technology that Councillor Penberthy referred to, we are going to need to look at longer time series because, with the ability of AI to help us with forecasting and so on, we need to be confident in some of those, some of the previous performance data that we have available to us. At the moment, we can probably get back to 2019 fairly simply in most areas. And certainly we've got good records available to us for further back than that, but it would take some time to pull those together. But certainly if the board was interested in any particular indicator over the last 3 years, pre and post pandemic, that's certainly something we could look to provide.
I think one of the things I'm trying not to do, and Ross didn't say it there, is overpromise. The team is really, really stretched. And if we try and get too much back data put in before we're ready for it, we'll be struggling to keep up to date with current performance management. So I think just in already going back across absolutely everything on 3 years, we spent quite a lot of time doing that last year. I think as we go towards processes that mean we're beginning to use the data for forecasting as well, that'll probably be when we can identify resource to help us upload things that will of course then be more than 3 years, because we've already got 3 years in the system. So we'll already be beginning to do that. But rather than us trying to spend a long time trawling historic data, unless it's something that is a specific, and if it's something that's a specific, it'll be more manageable than the entire data of the council in order to get these headline KPIs out. So I don't want to get Ross into coming to me and saying, Chris, I can't do this because I'm trying to get 3 years worth of back data across the council uploaded.
Thank you. Councillor Finn?
Yeah, thank you, Chris. I think you sort of covered it in part. What I was going to say is qualitative and quantitative analysis, such as KPIs. The most important thing, I guess, for scrutiny chairs is the actual outcomes. And it's being able to measure that in a clear and concise way. So you can have lots of figures, but they become meaningless so as to make them actually very extremely clear and concise, and a clear measurement for whatever's proposed as, whatever the question may be. Chair. Thank you.
Yeah, I recognise the importance of outcomes, the difficulty of creating the industry to measure outcomes is another thing. And on some of those, we might have some data that gives indications. On others, we might not. And yeah, the example I gave of DFGs would probably cost us 2 or 3 posts to be monitoring DFGs on an ongoing basis, because the numbers of them go up every year, and we would be just monitoring more and more people every single year. I'd rather spend 2 or 3 posts on doing an extra 5 or 6 DFGs faster so that people live in their own homes. So some of this is about where we prioritise. Where we can do outcomes relatively easily, we will do that, but KPIs don't lend themselves to outcome measurement.
Clarify what DFGs mean, please.
Disabled facilities grants.
Okay, happy to move on then, Chris. Thanks so far.
Okay, thank you. So moving on to the report we circulated. This is the final report of the 2023-24 financial year, ending in March. Apologies, it's taken a bit of time because it always takes a bit of time because we have one election and then we had another election. So it's sort of much later than we would have normally been bringing it to you. And it is against the indicators agreed at the beginning of that year alongside the corporate plan. We have made some real progress that we should be proud of. We have more 16 to 17-year-olds in education, employment and training than at any time since the pandemic. And that is a good trend that we need to be building on. And certainly, if we're thinking of the future of the city, children and young people in education is a real positive towards securing future workforces. When we took control of the council as an administration just over a year ago, 80% of pupils attended schools judged good or better by Ofsted. That figure is now 90%. Once again, a marked improvement. And I think, you know, our hats off to all of the schools out there who have been working really hard. But that's good news for city pupils as we drive an improvement agenda through work that you'll be scrutinising, I'm sure, Councillor Riley, on your panel. The number of complaints that we've dealt with, we've actually seen a substantial improvement in resolving complaints, up from 70% the year before to 88% within time frame now. That's a really good customer service thing to be dealing with. Complaints themselves aren't necessarily something to be afraid of, because we do need to learn from when things go wrong, but we do need to manage the complaints process well. 88% still, as far as I'm concerned, and it's not my area of responsibility, would be something I'd be wanting to push for more improvement on, but it is a definite move in the right direction. The importance of democratic participation is there. An increase in the number of voters in the city by 2,460. That is a marked increase, and I think thank you to everyone, both officers and politicians who go out and register people to vote. We really want everyone in the city who is eligible to vote to be able to vote, so that's good news. And sadly, not dealing with Section 21 evictions in the last Parliament, as had been promised, is actually having a massive impact on homelessness. Rents have been rising, evictions have been rising, and that isn't good. It's not good for families facing evictions and the uncertainty of that. In 2021-22, we prevented 839 households from becoming homeless. Last year, that was 929. So actually, we're stopping people becoming homeless. We're working with landlords trying to stop them doing Section 21s. We're trying to work out how we can keep people in their own homes for as long as possible. that increase of 90 households being prevented from going homeless will have saved the council a lot of money in terms of bed and breakfast and temp accommodation. It will have also not disrupted children and young people's schooling. It will have not meant people have to move from one doctor's surgery to another doctor's surgery and face mental health issues because they're not actually in the same stable environment they were in. So the knock-on impact there is not only on homelessness budgets, but on lots of other areas of the council's and our partners' work as well. So that prevention figure is really good, though, you know, I will be continuing to argue that Section 21 evictions need to be stopped as soon as possible because they are continuing to have a detrimental impact on the city in so many ways. We're able to use, that's one of the areas where in my portfolio I'm using the figures to make policy arguments in order to get the changes that we were promised by the last government and we've been promised by the current government and we need to see happen. So we're providing evidence to our MPs in that area. There are, of course, continuing challenges that are facing the council. We'll be working with the government and our partners locally to do our bit in delivering on the government's missions to deliver economic stability, cut NHS waiting times and crack down on antisocial behaviour. I hasten to say all of those, if you wish to delve into them, I will refer you to my cabinet colleagues with responsibility for. Chair, that concludes my introduction. I'm happy to take questions on my areas of responsibility and would welcome the committee's feedback on the content of the report.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Through you. It's just to refer to the risk table at the back of this report, which summarises the strategic risks facing the council currently. We've been providing risk reports to scrutiny panels over the course of the last year in an attempt to aid you in terms of populating your work programme. So clearly we don't have people that are directly responsible. I'm going to use the same get out clause as you, Councillor Pembele. Clearly we don't have people available here today to provide answers to very specific questions about the risks before you. But just to highlight a couple of the risks which are red on our strategic register at the moment. The first is concerning the risk of cyber attack. Now, that one has been red for a while. There's been a slight reduction against that risk, given the massive amount of work that is ongoing around cybersecurity and cyber governance. Of course, you've all received emails from me asking you to complete your cybersecurity training, and there's been no person fall foul of a phishing email, but that remains quite high because the government advice is that it should remain quite high on our strategic register, given the ongoing risks. Of course, the delivery of IT services to the council sits within the remit of this board, so should you wish to look at that further down the line, that's a possibility. The other risks highlighted on there are the increased and sustained pressure on the adult social care budget. Of course, very demand-led budget has remained on our risk register for some time, but I'm fully aware that Councillor Murphy has been relentless in looking at some of these issues in the health panel over the course of the year. Health inequalities is something, again, which is rated red on our risk register. It might be something that the Health Scrutiny Committee might look at in the future. And finally, the final red risk currently on there is the council's expenditure, the risk that it exceeds the resources available. And of course, we've had the discussion concerning financial forecasts for the coming year. So just on risk, Chair, happy to answer questions best I can. But like I said, there's a lot of work been gone over the course of the last year to get us to this place, and there will be further work. So I would anticipate further changes to the register as it stands currently. Thank you, Chair.
Any questions relating to that, the risk register? Councillor Darcy.
Chair, with your indulgence, I've got two questions. The risk register is the second question. Chris, I suspect you may not be able to assist me with my question I alluded to earlier, with your caveat, get out of jail card. But can you help at all in terms of the days lost due to sickness figure? I appreciate it. I think it may be Sue's portfolio, but you'll note it's not only up on last year, but it's up on the last quarter. So the direction of travel is not good. It's now reading at 10.63. Are you able to help us as to what's going on there and what measures will be taken to address that, and how soon we'll see the direction of travel returning to something more positive? Or will you defer to Sue on that one, if it is Sue's? And then I do have one on the risk register, which would be very helpful.
Yeah, although we could try and fill in, I'm certainly aware of growing numbers of long-term sickness, and that just in some of the teams that work with me, that can have an impact. COVID is still having an impact, and so there are some bits and pieces around. I wouldn't like to second guess too much the work that Sue's doing. I'm sure she'd be really happy to come and talk to you about the whole of the HR and the establishment, because I think that was probably a management board function now. You've guessed right. I think Ross might have a little more information, but realistically, you probably need Sue and the team from HR to come in to talk about that.
Through you, Chair. As far as I can recall, the main reasons for this level of sickness: musculoskeletal stress and COVID impact. I think we had a session at performance and finance last year.
As it was then, yeah.
As it was then.
Yeah.
The current HR director, Chris Squires, undergoing or in the development of the people strategy currently. As Councillor Penberthy alluded to, that's absolutely within the remit of this panel. So in terms of going forward, it might be sensible for us to look to schedule the people strategy into the work programme. I think I would also add there is an awful lot of work going on within the officer corps about well-being. It's a high priority. So certainly as a manager within the organisation, it's a high priority for me and my colleagues, and it is something we're getting support with from HR.
Through you, Chair, I would be keen to make a recommendation that it does come back to this committee, because previously it was under a different panel which I chaired, and it was always very helpful to have an insight into what's going on. If I may, Chair, just ask about the risk register, and in particular, I think it's risk 20. Sorry, I'm just opening up the document. And it's to do with IT provision. And again, in the previous existence, performance, financing, customer services, we looked at IT provision, and I'm acutely alive to the fact that DELT contract, we're now in an extended agreement, but that's due to expire in September of this year. And the DELT provision is for the next 10 years across the administration in terms of ICT provision and services. So it's more than significant in terms of the impact it will have on the local authority. So it'd be helpful, subject to contractual confidentiality, to understand, and it may be you, David, who wants to address this, but one, where we are in terms of that contract provision, because the cutoff, I think, was September of this year. So are we close to agreeing what that looks like? Cabinet recommendation is public. It was to remain with DELT as a service provision. And then the follow-up to that is this risk register adequately covering the risk that's presented as we are now, in terms of whether we have adequate contractual provision and what is the impact to the council, if that makes sense. You may wish to defer to David on that one.
If I kick off, I'm then going to pass different bits to both here. I'm aware that this is something that both Mark Lowry and Sue Dan have been working on really closely together. IT sits under Sudan's responsibility, risk sits under Mark's. I'm sure Mark would be really happy to have a discussion with you on risk as a whole, should you wish that to happen. In the same way, I'm happy to come any time on performance. I'm sure Sue would be happy to come here on IT, because once again, I think this is the panel that now picks that up. But I know that work is happening. David will pick up on contracts, Ross will pick up on risks, but speaking on behalf of my colleagues, I know they are working on it because I have been in those private cabinet sessions where they've been talking about the ongoing work on it. So it is a live issue, Councillor Darcy. It's not one that's just been parked, but I'll pass over to the two gentlemen here to detail.
I'm grateful, just before David comes in, it's just this has not been looked at by this committee.
Yeah.
And the last time it was looked was in my committee of last year. So it's been silent to scrutineers, and this is fundamental to the council. So it's important it's discussed.
I totally agree. And actually, having chaired the committee that you chaired when we were sitting on opposite seats, that committee had so much on it that it never got to look at a lot of the practicalities of what the council was doing, because it spent so much time on finance performance and internal issues. So I think that actually the management board picking up these council-wide issues is a real positive in terms of additional scrutiny time and taking pressure off that committee. But you're right, that meant that you didn't have much time last year to try and cover everything you were covering, and that would be, I think, personally appropriate for here. I'm sure David and Ross will fill in, and I'm sure that both Sue and Mark Lowry would be happy to come and talk to you about the work they're doing.
Excuse me. Thank you, Councillor Penberthy. So on the first question, absolutely, there is a lot of work going on in the background, and the relevant portfolio holders are heavily engaged in all the conversations about the renewal of the contract. And your date is correct that we are heading towards the 30th of September would be the end of the current contract. So as we stand, we are planning to renew, but it is a big contract and it's a very delicate because of what it does and what it means to the council, but also because we own dealt with a major partner, so the ICB, our health colleagues. So whatever we're doing, we have to be doing in tandem with them as well. So that's why it just makes that a little bit more complicated. But that doesn't mean that we are hiding anything at all. And you're absolutely right, Councillor Darcy, this is the right forum for you to have a look at the detail within that contract. So where we stand at the moment, we are very close to getting a finalised business case that all of us as owners of Dealt agree. And I'm quite happy to say that the relevant portfolio holders and officers can come back whenever you're ready, but probably if you give us maybe 3 or 4 weeks, so maybe towards the end of August, we can come back at your convenience to let you go through that. So that's where we are on the contract, if that's okay. Just in terms of, and I'll let Ross come in on the risk, etc., for a minute, but just I am the CIRO. There's an officer appointment for council's senior information risk owner. So all the risk for data, etc., actually sits with me. So I think I can try and answer that one for a moment. So the world is a changing place, isn't it? And cyber attacks have become far more sophisticated and changing all the time. So our response to that is we are very closely working with Dealt. We have set up a monthly cyber board that I chair to look at risks and opportunities, but also how we might mitigate those. So it will always be a risk because of the world that we live in, but we do feel that we're doing as much as we can in order to be secure. As an example, the easiest way, if that's the right phrase, for someone to hack into Plymouth City Council is through us as human beings, because we make mistakes more often than the systems might do. So, and the way they do that, the easiest route is to pick up an email address and start trying to come in that way. So we have set up, I'm going to be a bit clumsy, but what I call blind emails that come in from from Delt, and it will be a mock cyber type hacking email, and it's to catch you out. So it's not to put people on the naughty step, but it's to say if you would respond to that email, you'll get a note back going, why did you respond to that? Would you like to have another look at it, etc., etc. But we've also got the opportunity. We've got this new piece of technology where it's called a phishing hook, and you can click on this phishing hook and send it back to say, you're not fooling me on that one. And we've got training going on, and that is part of the training. So in terms of awareness, that is what we're doing for staff. And then in terms of systems, we're working very closely with Delt to make those as tight as we can.
Thank you, David. Councillor Finn, you have a question?
Yes, for you, Chair. Whilst I appreciate Section 1 is dependent on the government and relevant timescales as we speak, I do worry we're actually sleepwalking into a potential problem. I was at a funeral the other week and I was speaking to a guy who's got quite a few houses in Plymouth. And as a result of the removal of Section 21, he's starting to evict tenants already and put his properties on the market. When you look at the National Landlords Association, it's estimated 80% of the landlords are incidental landlords of 1 and 2 properties. And having spoke to numerous people in that field as well, should Section 21 go, they're going to be emptying their properties and putting their properties on the market the minute the government instigate this legislation or propose legislation. So I think from my perspective and from the housing scrutiny, there is a potential risk to the council short term. What is the preparedness for this risk and the mitigation?
Can I intervene here? Is there any declaration of interest needing to be declared for this matter from anyone? In terms of being a landlord? So, okay, thank you.
Hello, Chair. I am a landlord, but it's not. He's just talking.
No, we're talking about Section 21.
Oh.
And
I'm not
government
interjecting.
legislation.
I'm just listening to
Which
someone
is
talk.
what
We can have
Through
this
you,
all day
Chair.
long.
Through you, Chair. So obviously, Councillor Finn would like to talk about Section 21. Is that in relation to whether or not it should appear on our risk register?
Yes, that's what I'm trying to say. It's in the short term, it's looking at the risk register. What is the consequence to the council, and what preparedness is in place should, it go the other way? Because obviously there's huge financial cost to this authority.
Well, through you, Chair, that's not something I would be able to answer right now. I'm not sure anyone in this room could at the moment. Certainly is part of the Q1 risk review. I'll talk to colleagues to see whether it is considered that it should be a risk. But Councillor Penberthy might want to say a few words.
Chair, the abolition of Section 21 evictions was a policy of the previous government and is a policy of the current government. Therefore, the risk actually hasn't changed, and the council has been working with it since the previous government's manifesto was published. So it's actually something that has been a long-term issue that the council has been managing, and we continue to manage. Actually, there is a big issue on courts and the management of issues within tenancies, whether those are Section 8s or Section 21s or other conflicts between landlords and tenants. I haven't seen the detail of the legislation about to come forward. I reckon there will probably be a lot of similarities to the legislation that, had the general election happened 6 weeks later, would have probably completed its passage of both houses and been signed into law. So I think what we have here is something that is generally acknowledged. The conversations I have with landlords and their representatives they are quite useful, because it means landlords don't need to prove cause to the same degree, but that actually if they need to prove cause, the landlords will prove cause. So evictions are evictions. The nature of a Section 21 is that it happens a lot faster, and that means that we have less time to be prepared for the outcomes of it. But we have been working with that for a long time. It's why last year we agreed to spend £15 million worth of capital on buying temporary accommodation for families, because those Section 21s were already happening. They were already meaning that we had people too long in bed and breakfast, and why it's recently, you will have spotted the press because we had to publish the decision. We are in the process of buying a block, which we can't name yet, in order to provide for that risk. So we are already handling it. We have been handling it for a number of years. It was handled by myself, it was handled by Councillor Smith, it was handled by Councillor Pengelly, because that's how far back we are talking about. I'm not sure that we can say it's a new risk. I'm not sure we can say it's a changing risk, and actually having the certainty of knowing what the legislation is on the whole relationship between landlords and tenants will help us to move forward in a more stable way. And whether it was the previous government's bill or the current government's waiting to be published bill, it's that certainty that the market is waiting for. I hasten to say the conversations I'm having with the market are about the changes in taxation and relief regimes for landlords, which has meant that with the rising rates of interest, actually a lot of tenancies are now loss-making for landlords, and that isn't good for the sector. And I have already had conversations with advisors of new ministers about the need for us to look at how we ensure a healthy private rented sector. That does mean evictions need to be handled. It also means that we need to look at some of the changes to tax reliefs that were done and capital gains, which have actually meant that for landlords with the interest rate rises as well, they're not able to make the money they need to make just to pay the bills, let alone to run a business. I think Section 21s we're able to monitor because that's something that comes up in homelessness prevention. But there are many, many more parts of the private rented sector that need looking at the moment. I'm working really closely with South West Landlords on that, and we as a council are seeking to work alongside them, to lobby with them, and to work to support our private rented sector in Plymouth being a healthy and good one with good quality landlords. And I'm sure at some point I will welcome coming and talking about the bad landlords and some of the evidence we're beginning to find about those and what we need to do in Plymouth to tackle bad landlords as part of Plan for Homes. Thank you.
Thank you. But presumably this is a matter the Housing Communities Scrutiny Panel would deal with rather than this as a matter of course. Councillor Ricketts.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, in relation to homelessness, which is obviously an important topic to all of us, obviously within the homelessness delivery plan, which is coming up for review in next year, what worries me obviously is demand has now risen over and above the planned demand as articulated in the strategy. So wouldn't this now be on the red area of concern, I would argue? Would you agree, or is the purchase of this new student block mitigated that?
Although the whole homelessness delivery strategy is due for formal review next year, as part of Plan for Homes 4, we are already working on that. There are substantial work streams at mitigating the growth in homelessness. Ultimately, we need to build more houses, and there is action being taken on that, and there will be more news coming out over the next 12 months about long-term extra affordable housing being built, and we're working with our partners on that. Some of those are already coming up, and I'm looking forward to talking to the planning committee about one of those applications very shortly, because we need more affordable homes. There are a whole range of actions being taken on temporary accommodation to relieve pressures on bed and breakfast. The student block that we're buying is one of those. In terms of the supported housing accommodation programme and the LAF, which is the Local Authority Housing Fund, or the Local Assisted Housing Fund, which was a government programme, we are over punching our weight. And on the LAF, we secured the biggest individual project in the country and the largest local authority spend anywhere in the country that will be providing a lot more accommodation that will be coming online next March. We have lots of units that we're working on. There are lots of units that Bournemouth Churches are working on. There are lots of units that Path are working on, and Plymouth Community Homes. So we have a big joint endeavour to bring more accommodation on to meet temporary need, to reduce pay by night in bed and breakfast. Ultimately, we need to build more affordable housing, and there was a substantial announcement yesterday in Parliament about the government's intentions on that. We're already talking to Homes England about what that means for us here in Plymouth and the substantial investments that they are considering making. So, you know, there is a lot of work happening to tackle homelessness. On that basis, the mitigations would move the risk substantially down, and the mitigations have been brought in place in the last 12 months very substantially. And those mitigations over the last 12 months, in the next 24 months, will be bringing hundreds of additional housing units into the temp market on top of the housing that's being brought into the permanent market on affordable. So no, I don't agree that it's a red risk. I think it is a risk, but it's a risk that we're managing and mitigating and investing very heavily in solving, both us and our partners. But I think that £15 million that we put on the table has been an important thing in securing additional funding from other people, because they are wanting to come in and work with us on that. And I'm looking forward to more announcements coming out as we are able to do so, because obviously at the moment almost all of those are commercially confidential.
Thank you. A supplementary question, Councillor?
I think on that, Chris, I know you're passionate about your portfolio all up. I think it will be something we'll watch very closely. I think, you know, when demand has risen over and above our current strategy, I would argue that we're in the red risk area. So I think the relevant panel will have to keep a keen eye on this, and so will we as that oversight. What was the rationale for buying up a student block and not utilising Midland House to mitigate homelessness?
I think there are lots of rationales, some of which I can't go into. We did do an exercise on Midland House. The costs of doing Midland House in terms of renovations and everything else would have taken us longer and cost us more. The student block in question was offered to us as someone seeing the press we did, the interviews I did around the £15 million, as a business person saying, I want to help, and this is what I will do to help. I will hasten to say we were looking at student blocks before Path are looking at student blocks. Student blocks that are coming on the market are ones we are looking at potentially repurposing. But what we did with Midland House was we did a pure financial evaluation, and the results of that with ourselves, with our partners and with Homes England was that it was not a viable opportunity in terms of temp accommodation, either in terms of cost or speed, and that there were better solutions available that would be better for our client base and faster for our client base. So we looked at all of that. I can't go into the details of those commercially confidential discussions or of the costings, because other people are now looking at it from their perspectives as investors, in that we are marketing Midland House because it is surplus to our requirements. But the student accommodation, the time difference is some 2 years between the Midland House conversion and the student accommodation purchase and repurposing, because we will need to repurpose and we will need to be applying for planning permission as soon as we are able to, and that process is currently going through at the moment and will soon be coming out, because you cannot turn student accommodation into temporary accommodation without the change of use. So it is all being managed. I'm very happy to go back to the panel because the Plan for Homes Action Plan will be coming out. Plan for Homes 4 was published in March. We then went into local elections and general elections, so the panel haven't had a chance to look at it yet. The action plan for that covers 10 strands of work, one of which is this. So I'm sure that Councillor Finn will be looking at all 10 strands of their work. Well, actually, the ones that fall under his panel, because some do fall under growth and infrastructure.
Thank you, Councillor. One more question on this, Councillor Holloway, please.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to go back to David Northey, your points on cyber resilience and preparing for the future. You mentioned the cyber board. I was just trying to look online and couldn't see anything around how it's composed and what technical expertise was kind of brought on this. So a bit more information on that would be really useful. And additionally, There's something called the Cyber Assessment Framework, which was produced by the National Cybersecurity Centre, which I believe is doing a number of sort of pilots with local authorities on how they're fit for the future. It'd just be good to understand, and if you don't have that information, happy to pick up afterwards, but good to understand how engaged Plymouth is on cyber issues with some of the national schemes and pilots they're developing. Thank you.
Okay, so taking the second part first, my understanding is we're very engaged with national groups on this, but I can get more detail on that, that's fine. And I think maybe if we come back to the committee talking about dealt contract, and maybe that's another good opportunity to, through you, Chair, to think about how we look at cyber security and what that means. In terms of the board, we use the term board. It's an officer board rather than constituting members, so it's not part of the constitution. It's not a decision maker. It'll make recommendations to corporate management team or to cabinet as required. So it's not fully constituted that you can see on our web pages. Quite happy to, quite happy to come back with sort of the topics that we talked about last time and where we're going, and you can have some input to what we should be thinking about. Yeah, absolutely.
I'd be fascinated, thank you.
Takes all sorts. I apologise to Councillor Murphy. I had a whisper in my ear which I ignored, not intentionally, but you had your question up, your hand up rather, a while ago.
Okay, Chair, I'm used to that, it's fine. It's just a quick follow-up on what Councillor Darcy said about the sick. Would it be possible to have the breakdown of sickness levels in departments, because that would give us a better insight of maybe why each department, because for example, street scene is probably going to have a higher sick rate than somebody that sat up at Dell, basically. So it probably would be interesting to see where the level, if it is going up, where it's going up.
Through you, Chair, yes is the short answer. There is a number of workforce reports available on the internet, published frequently, so we'll make sure that you've got those links, and we can certainly bring something back, Councillor Murphy.
Sorry, just through you, Chair, just that is a key strand that you will be looking at when we get to the budget scrutiny in December. So to have early sight of that and direction of travel would be most helpful, I would suggest.
Thank you, and it may be worth having that beforehand, because out of this work, two recommendations perhaps are emerging. One is to have a presentation from the appropriate cabinet colleague or officer about how we manage well-being and sickness and the impact of that, for us to learn about as a board. Are you happy with that? Yeah. For us to go with that recommendation? Yeah. And Councillor Darcy has a recommendation he wishes to bring forward as well as a result of our discussion now.
Chair, it was to bring back before the end of September, because obviously that's the date, the DELT arrangements, DELT agreement contract for the provision of IT and services for the next 10 years. And in addition to that, I think it would be helpful to have the main cabinet members here, because it transcends across all of the services, but I think the two, it's probably Mark Lowry and Sue, is it? Yeah, because it's fundamental to the council's future for the next 10 years, certainly. And that, if I recall, David, that contract has to go for full council approval, does it not? No? Oh, okay, so we definitely need to see it then. Given the financial numbers that we'll take care of. Yeah. So that would be my recommendation, Chair.
Happy to accept that recommendation? All in favour? Okay. Thank you.
Chair, I've got further questions.
Right. What I was going to say is the interesting, by necessity, the last debate went off, where we had quite a good debate about that. As always, there'll always be, I've got some questions from this report as well, which I won't bring up now because of time, but I'm sure you could contact any of us if you have any questions, and we can get those questions answered. But you,
Chair,
you did have two questions, Councillor Ricketts, on that, and supplementaries as well each time.
I'm trying to be quick. I mean, I appreciate the
No,
depth.
no, because we'll all jump in, and I know what Councillor Riley's like with me, so
Chair, I was,
she shuts me up as well when I try to be persistent.
I was about to say, I'm very happy to do my best to answer questions. I would suggest if they're on the detail of service delivery, that they get referred through the chairs of those panels, asking those panels to look at it when they look at a performance and activity. Because whilst I'm happy to talk about my areas of responsibility, coming here is really the overarching and to identify things that you have done today, where I'm quite happy to slopey shoulder my colleagues into coming with more detailed reports to you or to other panels. So I think, yeah, I'm very happy to, but I'm conscious that I can't always give.
That's a really important point, and because the purpose of this committee is to board is to actually discuss the issues that aren't discussed on the brief for the other four overview and scrutiny panels.
Chair, we're here, yeah, to scrutinise. We've hardly asked any questions in the scheme of it. Okay, we've had panel members talking thoroughly with their answers. This isn't thorough scrutiny. The earlier items we had about one or two questions, because that's sometimes the way it is. If people aren't going to ask questions, okay, you don't just end it. You don't end the conversation at 3:30. I've only got a couple of questions. We've got to do things properly. We've got to hold the administration to account.
We are doing so, and we've had 7 questions,
Hardly
plus
any
supplementaries
questions.
on this, which has been the most engaging, I mean that with all respect, but the most interactive part of the afternoon so far, because I know it's been important for you all. So as we said, if there are any further questions, we can go further on by referring them to Ross in the first instance. And the other scrutiny panels. The King's speech, please, which you've all been given a summary of.
Thank you, Chair, through you.
Thank you, Councillor Penworthy. Thank you very much. Thank you.
I think we pulled Councillor Penworthy out of another meeting, so I think he's quite keen to get back. Thank you, Chair. So, King's speech, as chairs will be aware, we've been quite keen to make sure that your forward work programmes have some flexibility and space to deal with outcomes or the new legislative agenda of the new government. King's speech identified, I think, in the region of about 44 bills, some of which will be very important to us. Things like the Planning and Infrastructure Bill, things like the English Devolution Bill, just a reference to our previous conversation, the Cybersecurity and Resilience Bill is probably something that will come here, Mental Health Bill, and so on and so forth. We've got a briefing that was supplied to all members just after the King's speech. It's here to give you a sense of what was included, what we should expect on work programmes going forward. I think that's it, to be honest, Chair. I don't think I can add any more at this point. Happy to take questions, but certainly this is a point of discussion for members to include on their work programmes going forward. Thank you.
Okay, so shall we just note the receipt of the King's speech summary and consider the work programmes that you have, each of your committees, how some of them need to be implemented. And of course, it will obviously mean that there might be some planned aspects of work that you've looked at for the coming year that might have to slip if some of these and the implementation of these and the consequences of these for us as a council need to be discussed as a matter of priority. Okay, any questions? Now is an opportunity to have an update from committee chairs, but their work programmes. You've had a copy of what's been discussed. This is an opportunity for each of your chairs or vice chairs who are here representing that committee, if they wish to elaborate on some of the work that has been chosen to be developed. So is there something from the Natural Infrastructure and Growth Scrutiny Panel that wishes to be brought to our attention? Councillor Darcy?
Thank you, Chair. I mean, members have had the papers. We've had one meeting, a very productive meeting, ably assisted by Vice Chair Councillor Holloway. It's early in the municipal year, and as Ross has alluded to, depending on the outcome of the King's speech, particularly with those planning-related national policy changes, so our workflow that we've set for the year may have to slip a little. We've got a very busy meeting on the next agenda, meeting 29th of October, but we'll wait to see what the government announce and how that might influence our agenda going forward, but nothing other than that, Chair, unless you have any questions.
Thank you. Councillor Riley, do you want to bring our attention to anything on the Children, Young Peoples and Families Scrutiny Panel?
Yeah, so we tend to, well, we have really bulky scrutinies most of the time because of the improvement stuff that's going on. We have a clear November, which was kind of waiting for what was coming out through the election and stuff. So the well-being in the King's speech, there's a lot about children's well-being, and we're hoping, so one of our recommendations was for a select committee, which obviously moving forward, that's what we'd really like to achieve, because there's a few things on there that I haven't been able to really scrutinise, and now I will be able to, which is fabulous. So not really anything else to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions on what you've seen? Can I just bring attention to the SEND Sufficiency Commission plan as well, because that's an example of an investor save, in a sense. There's one of our budget pressures as a council is the cost of children having to be educated out of the city so their needs can be met. Additionally, there's an issue of some children being not in the right place at the right time within our city as well. So it's not just children we send out of the city, but also send across the city. And the SEND Sufficiency clearly sets out an opportunity to develop special needs provision in mainstream schools, additional provision in mainstream schools, so that children have an opportunity to learn alongside other children. Their needs aren't sufficiently necessarily fit the criteria for special schools, because there are, even though that capacity is going to be increased, but there are children who can learn alongside primary and secondary mainstream schools, which will enable more children to live and learn in their communities. And that just is not just beneficial for those individual children, but for the families of them as well, who can actually make those, have a sense of belonging in the community. Now, there will be an investment in that, but it's a clear example of not just the right thing to do educationally and ethically, in my view, but also financially. That will actually enable us to have even better special needs provision in the city and for our children. And that will be presumably shared at full council as well, and the opportunity to discuss that there. From the Health and Wellbeing Scrutiny Committee.
You haven't forgotten me this time, then, Chair?
Oh, you're there, I see your point.
So you didn't even know who it was, did you? Oh my God.
There you go.
No, I don't think you were, Chair. We had our first meeting, I think it was last week, which was really, really good. We had the NHS in, and they talked about the Peninsula Acute Sustainability Programme, which a few recommendations came out of that, but basically what it boils down to is I think it's the pressure's going to be put on patients more than the NHS, if I'm being totally honest. It's about, so basically what it means is there'll be like specialist consultants right across the county and in Cornwall. So if you've had I got an eye problem, you might say to you that you've got to Torbay. Yeah, you'll get it'll get seen to quicker. But what they wouldn't answer was who would have the cost for that. Would it be down to the patient? Because as it is now, we've got residents on low incomes. So if they had that added pressure, they're not going to be able to afford it. So they would not answer any of those questions. So the recommendations, that was some of the recommendations that we put forward to them. So it'll be interesting to see what comes back from the survey that they're doing. One of the examples that we've got coming back in our meeting in October is the end of life care update. When you talked about earlier, you know, what did you get out of that? I mean, we've done an intense end of care scrutiny, and that took 2 days. And there was recommendations that came out of that. So it's going to be interesting to see if the NHS have taken those recommendations in-house, and so see what update they've got when they come back. And obviously on the work programme, you can see that there's stuff that we're going to be bringing back. We'll just, it is early, we'll have our agenda meeting, and we'll decide what we're going to put on.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Any comment? Any questions? Thank you, Polly. And now, housing and community services. Any feedback from that, Councillor Finn?
Yeah, we had a good meeting on the 26th, Serious Violence Duty Action Plan. Recommendations have been derived from that regard to trying to get the funding up front and try and reduce the delay in funding. A recommendation was made to the Police and Crime Commissioner to that effect. We're also looking at other avenues such as probation, to whether introducing them into the multi-agency approach. But obviously there's community payback, which all councillors can use here. They're always looking for ideas to actually get the offenders out in the community working, and also to see if we can tap them up for some money. The plan for the public toilets review, Councillor Penworthy and Thorpe, it was an interesting one. There's been so many changes of officers over the last couple of years, and everything's got so dragged behind that the report still isn't finalised. So they're looking, hopefully now with the new director in place, that we can actually get some work done on this to complete that, to bring it before committee, discuss it, and obviously make recommendations should there be any necessary. We try not to look too far ahead. We're just looking on taking manageable slices at 6 months at a time. Another one with regard to the Serious Violence and Action Plan was obviously Councillor Hayden, its availability of her, so it was a bit delayed on that, but accepted, not a problem. Bereavement services update on the 16th of October is going to be an interesting one, because obviously we're opening a new crematorium, but it's trying to look at where Efford and Western Mill lay in the bigger picture. Obviously there's maintenance costs, ongoing maintenance costs, etc., to the estate there. Looking for a general update from street services, again financing and basically a needs assessment on that, which has been identified. And then obviously once we know a bit more from government regarding the homelessness strategy, obviously this is why we planned that one for the 4th of December, took that away, so it allows the government to publish what they need to publish, and then we can sit down and look at it jointly with our strategies as they currently stand, or what better we could do to improve them thereafter, Chair.
Thank you very much. With all committees, if any councillor has any questions relating to any of the matters here, they can make their representation to contact members of that committee. Thank you very much. Just ask you to note the report and the report as presented based on the 4 scrutiny panels, and consider the work that's been presented. Bear in mind there may be some flexibility needed. But it's interesting because some of the King's Speech issues address some of the issues that you've discussed anyway in your groups, but obviously there's additional ones as well. Well, we need to consider the work programme for this board now. Over to Ross.
Right, thank you, Chair. So we've not included a work programme because this was the first meeting. We've not discussed it. But as we discussed earlier, standing agenda items for the Scrutiny Management Board will be finance, performance, risk and risk reporting. From our discussions today, I think we've identified that the people strategy linked to some of the wellbeing and sickness information will need to come to this body. We will need to go away and get some dates for you in terms of reviewing the DELT contract and the impact of that. I think also just looking through the King's speech, and happy to be corrected. Looking through the King's speech, I think there's a few things that probably would end up with this panel. Or this board, Budget Responsibility Bill, the English Devolution Bill, and some of the digital information and cybersecurity bills all feel as though they fit very squarely within the remit of this board. So if the committee is agreed, Chair, what we'll do is go away, make an assessment of when we're likely to see the detail of some of these bills, and we'll make the changes to your work programme. Of course, happy to add anything that come from members this afternoon.
Councillor Holloway.
Thank you, Chair. Really good to hear that, Ross. I was discussing with Councillor Blight and the Chair prior to this meeting, particularly around the English Devolution Bill, where you can see there are elements that would fit into both the communities scrutiny and natural growth and infrastructure scrutiny. So how will it work in practice then if you're looking at these bills that potentially have, some of them are quite squarely in this panel, like the cyber resilience one, but how will it work for developments that have more of a cross-cutting theme? Do they just sit squarely here, or is that how has that worked previously, and how are you proposing it would work under this new scrutiny structure? Thank you.
So previously, the way that we've dealt with it is bringing an initial discussion to the Scrutiny Management Board, identify how cross-cutting it actually is. Obviously, sometimes there's quite small elements that would sit in other panels. Now we can do that however the board decides they wish to do it, to be honest. So that might be a session on a day like today, a business meeting, an agenda session of say 40 minutes or whatever it might be. From that, you might decide that actually you need to have a select committee review to look quite a lot more deeply into those issues. You might decide that actually you'll recommend to one of the panels that they take on the specific role in respect of a bill. It's of course been quite a long time since we've had such a raft of legislation all at once. My last experience of it obviously was around 2010-11 when we were dealing with the Localism Bill, the Health and Social Care Act 2012, the Policing Bill and so on. So there was quite a lot. At that point, we were in a discipline of having white papers prepared in advance of any draft legislation being prepared. Hopefully, that's what we're going to get in the future. And that makes consideration of such issues much easier to do because it tends to set out the government's intentions and generally looks for consultation responses at that point. The board will take a strong role in that respect and make recommendations to Cabinet on its findings. But I think very much Cabinet would hope that the scrutiny function does most of the heavy lifting in terms of assessing impact of new legislation on our local communities.
Do you have a supplementary? Councillor Dart, Councillor Blight.
Thank you. At the Housing and Communities Scrutiny meeting last week, the issue of council tax support scheme was raised, and there was a question about whether that fitted under the remit of that committee or elsewhere. And my question is, it's important because if we do nothing, there's still going to be an increase in council tax demands. So is it something for this committee instead?
Through you, Chair, thank you. I don't think it's here. I think it's housing and community services. The reason for that is a policy decision. It's a local policy decision made by this council, which impacts local communities. I think it would be much more sensible to discuss that at the housing committee. I think that the decision, it's one of Chris's, but what the decision around it, the policy around it can be dealt with at that panel. The financial implications of how that works would be dealt with here.
Okay, I do have one. With the arrangements for local elections, all outs or 3 out of 4 years, consultations going on through now, is it for this board to discuss or to learn from the outcomes of that with the appropriate cabinet member who may be overseeing that?
I think it's reasonable for this committee to consider updates against those issues. However, the Audit and Governance Committee has taken a strong role in reference to elections and voting for the last 18 months. It's written into their terms of reference. I think at this stage, we would most likely duplicate work that was already being undertaken by Audit and Governance, but certainly, Chair, updates in regards to the position of council size submission, conversations with LGBTE or whatever it might be, can certainly be brought back to this group.
Thank you. And as mentioned earlier on, there's the standing agenda items as well, with performance, risks and finance, which are, as you know, are quite meaty topics as well. So, do we have a work programme plan for at least one more meeting? Because we'll presumably have the DELT, a separate meeting, a one-item only meeting for the DELT contract and discussion about that, where we go with IT.
So through you, Chair, if it's okay, in consultation with yourself, if we put together the work programme and circulate, it might be the best way to get that resolved. Certainly, you are going to need to have, I think, a single session on DELT seems totally reasonable. We'll need to factor in the 2 or 3 day budget scrutiny. So if we provide dates and some indicative timescales against some of those issues, and we'll circulate amongst the membership, if that's okay.
Thank you. Okay with that, everyone? Okay, thank you. Okay, we're on to number 13.
Yeah, we don't need that.
No, and as there is no exempt business, I can call a close to the meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you.